Welcome to our first week of Journey Together. So our goal with this resource is to put out a weekly video that will be a brief teaching, a hope to keep it brief for you, and also some discussion questions that you could dive in, watch the video, and then take some time with maybe your family or a journey group and dive into the scripture a little bit more deeply. This past Sunday, I shared with you a message out of 1 Peter chapter 2, and we talked about this good news, that we are chosen and called to be a community of priests. So I want to unpack that a little bit more. There's a whole lot in that passage you could keep diving into, but we're going to look at a different passage in Ephesians chapter 4 for a few minutes together right now. So I'm going to read it in the New Living Translation in Ephesians 4, 1-6. The Apostle Paul's writing, and he says this: "Therefore I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, in all, and living through all." So I'm going to encourage you to dig into that passage using some of our typical journey group questions that we would ask when we gather around Scripture, like, well, what jumps out at you just in your first read? And what's this passage teach us about God? And what's this passage teach us about us as human beings? And then trying to bridge the gap and consider, where does the truth of this passage intersect with my life today? Where's the relevance for me? So as I'm sharing, I trust that if you're digging into the scripture with those questions, you're gonna hear God speak in some unique and very personal ways. But I'm going to share 3 observations that hit me as I was reading the passage, and hopefully maybe it'll offer something that'll help you as you're digging in on your own. And so 3 kind of invitations for us. Specifically, I'm thinking about what's it mean for us to live into our calling as priests, to embrace that calling. And so the first one is this, that if we're going to embrace our calling as priests, it means we need to be intentional. Nobody is going to live into your calling as a holy priest accidentally. It just doesn't happen. And the way Paul says it in this passage when he says, lead a life worthy of your calling, there's intentionality in that. We have to choose every day what kind of life we're going to lead, what kind of choices we're going to make, how we're going to spend our time and energy, what kind of attitude we're going to have, who's going to influence us, and how are we going to influence others. We have to make a choice about the life that we're going to lead. The words that he uses, live a life worthy of your calling, a little bit intimidating a lot of times, right? And I think sometimes we can stop short of leaning into that invitation because worthy of our calling seems so far off. And the journey's so far ahead that it can keep us from just taking the next step. And we're talking about being intentional. It's this choice to just every day take a next step. And what if we started every day and we said, all right, I know I am chosen and called to live as a priest. What am I going to do today? What next step am I going to take today to live into that calling? And then just be proactive about it. Take a step every day to grow to be more like Jesus, to love like him, to serve like him. And celebrate progress rather than being hindered by a vision of perfection that's so far out there that you might think you're never going to reach it. So, just think about how you could take a step today. I mean, maybe you're thinking, I need to spend more time in Scripture. Okay, great. So maybe you won't memorize the book of Ephesians this week. Maybe you could read a little bit each day. Maybe you feel like you need to pray more and get more connected to God. So don't start off with, I'm going to fast and pray for an hour every day or fast for a day every week. Just start with 5 minutes. Take a step today. Move in that direction. Be intentional. Some of you are really moved with compassion for the elderly right now who are isolated, or others who are isolated and have needs. And you can't meet every need out there, but I bet you could take a step. You could pick up the phone and call one person. You could find a way to do something to serve, to show compassion to one person today. And so don't look at all the journey ahead. Just be intentional. Every day, priests take next steps. We make progress on the journey. The second invitation of this passage that jumps out at me is in the second verse where it says, always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Encouragement just to be humble and gentle. It's one of those verses I wish we could take out the word always, but just make it like sometimes. Or on your best days, be humble and gentle. But it says always. And the good thing about that is what it follows with. Always be humble, right? And so I think a big part of Paul's invitation is just giving us permission to not do this perfectly. I mean, we're chosen and called to live as priests, but we are imperfect priests. We don't have it all figured out. We don't always get it right. When Paul says be humble, he's giving us permission to be okay not being okay. He's giving us permission to have a misstep here and there. He's giving us the opportunity just to take the next step and be humble about our progress, our place on the journey, but also allow others, make allowance for each other's faults. Now, I got to be honest, I can be harder on myself than others at times, but then it can also flip-flop, and I can treat my kids, and this is not a good thing, all right? I'm not proud of this, but I can expect my kids to be processing this pandemic in the same way that I am as a 43-year-old man, right? And I need to allow space for them to be where they are on the journey. And that helps a lot when I recognize I am not navigating this perfectly either. So I can name that my impatience, my lack of gentleness in my quarantined household. And so I can offer grace to you on your journey. I can offer grace to my kids when I remember how far I have to go as well. And so when we're going to be living as priests, we allow lots of space for our own weakness, our own brokenness, our own missteps. And when we receive grace ourselves, then we can be gentle with others. We can be patient with others because they're not there yet either. They haven't arrived either. We just offer that to one another. We flesh that out in the everyday stuff of life. Not perfection, but progress is what we're going to celebrate. And then the last thing for me in this passage that jumped out is just the invitation that if we're going to live a life worthy of our calling, it's going to mean that we're doing it together, that we are united together. That's a little bit of a redundant way to say it, but I like the word united in the translation we read. But the Message paraphrase in verses 4 and 6 says it this way: you are all called to travel on the same road and in the same direction, so stay together, both outwardly and inwardly. You have one master, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who rules over all, who works through all, and is present in all. Everything you are and think and do is permeated with oneness. I love that stay together, both outwardly and inwardly. When it comes to living into our calling as priests, there is no such thing as a solo priest. We are chosen and called as a community of priests. We need each other on this journey. That's really one of the primary reasons we're putting out this video, these Journey Together videos, is that we recognize we need to be comforted and encouraged and challenged by one another. We need space and community to dig into Scripture and to discern God's voice, to hear God speak, to check in with each other a week from now and say, hey, how'd that go? Did you take that next step? Hey, I've been praying for you. I know it's hard in your house, or whatever it might be. We need each other. And even if we can't gather in the same room, we need to do this journey together. As I was reading this verse this morning even, That last part of it jumped out at me, where it says, one God and Father of all, who rules over all, works through all, and is present in all. And I think maybe I needed the reminder, maybe you do. But I'm pretty sure that that word all includes the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. God is present in the midst of this. And I don't know about you, but there have been some moments where I maybe forgot that. And one of the biggest ways that we don't forget that God is present, that He's still King, and He still sits on the throne, and He's still sovereign, He still cares, He's still involved, is we do it together. We need to be in community to be reminded that, hey, this might be hard, this might be unexpected, this might be discouraging or frustrating, but God is present. He is with us in this. And if we're not together, it becomes a whole lot easier for us to forget the presence of God and the everyday stuff of life. And so my prayer is that you're going to be looking at this video with some friends in a journey group or with family members, and that you're going to dig in together. And my prayer for you is that as you dig into the Scripture, as you talk with one another, that you are going to be reminded that God is present, that you are going to experience in a very personal and powerful way God's presence among you as you journey together.